Hello beautiful people, and welcome back to another video. So in today's video, it's going to be half part me rambling and the other half me going over what I believe will be beneficial writing advice for those who are seeking some type of career on Wattpad. So if you read the title of this video, then you already know that I'm going to be talking about the 2024 Wattys Awards. And if you've never heard of it before, long story short, it's the annual writing contest that Wattpad runs for its writers. So they seek out the best of the best, quote unquote, performers, and if you win the top spot with your book, you're granted a big cash prize, and for some people, it may even get a publishing deal out of it. If you want to check out last year's winners, I'll leave a link for that in the description box below. So while I didn't win anything, I was pleasantly surprised that my book was shortlisted, and I mean legit surprised. Like the kind of surprise where you have to stare off into space for 10 minutes because you can't believe what you just read. That kind of surprise. And I don't know if I mentioned this before or not, but I've been writing on Wattpad since 2012. I'm practically a freaking dinosaur. So when I tell you guys that I've been trying my hardest to get some type of recognition for my writing on that platform, I really mean that. And not so that I can have any bragging rights or anything like that, but more so it was a personal goal that I wanted to cross off the list that I created for myself for how I wanted my Wattpad career to go. So I've been in deals and have had so many amazing monetary opportunities from Wattpad since around 2014. And while the platform isn't the same as it used to be, I still have a small space left for it in my heart. So when my book got shortlisted, it really felt like everything had finally come full circle. Even though I didn't win, I didn't even care. It's like I crossed off everything that I wanted to do for my Wattpad journey, and it was a bittersweet feeling. So I started off as a clueless writer who had absolutely no idea what she was doing, to someone who had become so much more confident in her skills. Don't get me wrong, I still have my days where I think everything that I write is complete garbage, but other days, you gotta hype yourself up and believe in your craft. But on top of all that, just, getting better at writing, I just felt like that it showed in the book that got shortlisted, because I really poured my all into it, and I feel like the judges saw that as well, or at least I hope they did. I don't know. So anyway, after spending a literal decade on the platform, I finally got a book that's shortlisted in the Wattys. So now I'm going to give out some writing advice and cover a few things that I feel like I improved on over the years and may have been what helped me get shortlisted. So the first thing that I want to talk about is plotting versus pantsing. A plotter is someone who outlines everything in their book from start to finish, including the character's background, the plot, every little detail in between. But every plotter is different, so where one plotter may go into super detail about their plot, where they have an outline for every single chapter, that's going to be in their book. Another plotter may only have their characters fleshed out and just have a high-level overview of what they want their plot to be. So I'm the first type of plotter. I get everything out about my story before I start writing the first chapter. And by everything, I literally mean everything. So I write out the who the main characters are, the love interests, who the side characters are, everything from what everybody looks like to what their hobbies are, the names of their best friends, the names of their parents, siblings, animals if they have any, whether or not they went to high school or college, their education, how were they growing up, how was their childhood. Basically, every single thing that you can know about a person, that's what I write out for my fictional characters. So that's how detailed I get before I actually start writing my stories. And I also do the same thing with my plot. I detail what's going to happen in the beginning of the story, what's going to happen in the middle, and what's going to happen at the end. Not everyone is capable of writing this way, and I wouldn't suggest that everyone write this way, because you have to figure out what works best for you. But this is what works for me, because the way that my brain works these days as I'm getting older, if I'm just starting off on a blank Word document and I'm expected to start a brand new story from scratch, I literally will not be able to function. I need something to go off of. And I need to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, who it's going to happen with, all the little details. So not just a light or general idea, I need details. So I don't know, that's just the way that my brain works these days, and it's how I've been plotting for the last couple of years, and I just found that it helps me write faster because I already know what's going to happen in the chapter. I know what's going to happen in the next chapter, and and I know what's going to happen by the end of the chapter, in the beginning, middle, end. So I know what's going to happen. That's the main takeaway here. That's how detailed my outline is, and all I have to really do at that point is just sit down and literally write out the chapter. So yeah, that's basically what plotters are. Some plotters anyway. So a pantser is the complete opposite of a plotter. A pantser may have a general idea of what they want their book to be about. They may only know how they want their main character to be and their love interest and nothing else. So like, for example, a girl is interested in her brother's best friend, but she's afraid to pursue him due to the consequences that may follow. A pantser could sit down and immediately start writing chapter 1 just based off that simple idea. And a few days later, they could come back and start writing chapter 2 and pick up right where they left off without having any idea of where they want the story to go. So they basically just go with the flow and listen to their gut and, what they want to do next. It really doesn't matter. Being a pantser can actually be really freeing because you don't restrict yourself on how your story can go, which is something that plotters can often get hung up with because they follow such a strict outline. So if a pantser wants to eliminate a main character or a fan favorite in chapter 26, then they can do that because they probably don't have the next 10 chapters planned out. So anything can go, and there's room for them to, completely change up the direction of their story. Whereas if a plotter was to do something like that and kill off a main character or a fan favorite, it could literally derail the rest of their story because they're making a impulsive decision for a character whose purpose they already planned out from start to finish. So it's kind of like the butterfly effect when it comes to plotters changing things up midway of the story. If they take away XYZ, then it could literally change how the rest of the story would go, and they would essentially have to plot out a whole new plot. Now, fun fact, I actually used to be a pantser when I first started out on Wattpad. It was nice to, work on a book, take a break, and then come back a couple days later and just pick right up where I left off and do whatever I wanted. But over time, like I said, especially as I got older and when I started working on more than one book at a time, which I don't recommend, I found that I would often run into having more plot holes and also needing to take longer breaks so that I could literally remember the storyline for this book and try not to get things messed up in this book, and because I really didn't have anything written down in stone for anything that I was working on at the time because I was just going with the flow. So things essentially got messy, and I would end up letting a lot of books just die out and never finish them because all the fun that I initially had when I first started the book slowly faded away over time because I didn't even know where the direction the plot was going anymore, and it was too difficult for me to try to start over from scratch when I already had like 30,000 words written for the story. So I started to get a lot more organized after that, after I took a break from Wattpad and just do more research into the different ways that you could create a book, and that's how I learned about the different ways of being a plotter, and things pretty much took off from there. So I say all that to say this: you don't have to be a hardcore plotter like me, but if you are trying to get serious about your writing, then you can't come in without a plan. You do need to have some type of clear outline in mind before you start writing for how you want your story to go and what kind of character arc you want your characters to have, and etc. Because if something feels off or doesn't make sense in your story, the judges will notice that. And this leads to a good transition of things that Wattpad is specifically looking for. So I'm going to link the resources in the description box below. for what you see on the screen. So check that out and try to implement the most important parts into your story and make sure you're doing it in a way that can be consumed in serial format for Wattpad readers, which is, Wattpad is a serial fiction platform. And readers of serial fiction tend to have shorter attention spans than the average reader who may pick something up from Amazon or something like that, like a physical book. So if your chapter is like over, I would say personally, this isn't set in stone, 3,000 or 3,500 words, and your plot isn't all that engaging, then the readers are probably going to swipe off your book and move on to the next thing. So you always want to make sure your chapters are not necessarily short, but also not crazy long. But one thing that they do need to have, at least for what I see on Wattpad, what works in the most popular books, is that every chapter should end on some type of a cliffhanger. That's very important because for most readers, it will ensure that, I want to know what's going to happen next. I don't want to put this book down. I want to keep reading. So, you do what works for you. Of course, listen to the feedback from your readers. Ask them, hey, do you guys prefer shorter chapters, longer chapters? It's going to vary based on your audience, really. So none of this is set in stone. You just have to test things out and figure it out as you go. But all of this will come easy to you, at least once you start with the foundation, which is the outline of your story. Like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be super strict. So if you're a pantser, you can still do your own thing and go with the flow. Just make sure to keep in the back of your mind that each chapter needs to tie into the next chapter and things need to consistently make sense. So don't forget that your main character started off with brown hair and blue eyes in the first chapter, so she shouldn't be a redhead with green eyes by chapter 10. So don't try to go off the rails or even have too many subplots that distract from the journey the main character is on. And the next thing that I want to talk about really quickly is grammar and punctuation. So having close to perfect but not necessarily flawless grammar and punctuation is something that the judges in the Wattys look for when choosing what books get shortlisted or even become winners. And for this, I have 2 suggestions to help you out. You probably already heard before, and that will be what most people recommend these days, which is Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid. And if you don't have the funds to invest in either of those programs, then of course you can always check out writer discourse or writer Facebook groups that specifically are about helping one another become better. Unfortunately, I don't have any recommendations here, so if you guys do, go ahead and link them in the comments. Okay, so we've covered plotting versus pantsing, and we briefly talked about grammar and punctuation, so now let's talk about pacing. The pacing of your story is very crucial, and it's also one of the hardest things to perfect in writing. It's something that I continue to struggle with to this day because there are certain times in the story where I can just go off the rails when I do deviate from my outline, and just have my characters in a bit of a space where they kind of just hang out and don't really do anything that pushes the plot forward. Some people might call these fluff chapters, and for example, it can be like when your character and the love interest is going out on a cute little date, or it's a chapter where there isn't any action happening at all and it's just 2 characters talking, like a slice of life type of thing. I'm not saying you can't have any chapters like this in your story at all, but what I am saying is that you don't want there to be too many chapters like this, and especially not back to back. Something should be happening in every chapter or every other chapter that helps move the plot forward, and if it doesn't, then you may need to think about cutting that chapter out in your second round of editing. So I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but we're here now, so but let's go ahead and talk about tropes. If you want to see any type of attention on Wattpad, then you need to take a look at the books that readers are flocking to the most. And in the overall market, not just on Wattpad, but also on places like Amazon, romance tends to be the most popular genre there is. Now, I'm not saying you need to turn into a romance writer and that's all that you need to crank out on your Wattpad profile, but I am saying that if you do write romance, then Wattpad offers resources that tells you exactly what they're looking for when it comes to a story. that they may be interested in. So you may want to check that out if you're interested in joining their Wattpad Originals program. Also, the link will be in the description box below for everything that you've been seeing on the screen in regarding to the writing resources. Now, for everyone else who writes outside of the romance genre, you can still take the advice that I've been talking about in this video from the resources that I've been covering so far and apply it to your story as well, or your form of writing. Because I follow writers on Wattpad who don't write in the romance genre, and their books have just taken off, and some have even been published by Wattpad. So, and it's nothing to do with romance. It's like a fantasy story. So you really don't have to box yourself into the romance genre to, get a million reads or gain a large following or anything like that. You just have to have a good story at the end of the day. Use some good tropes, have a good plot, and likable characters. Now, I can go on and on about the different types of advice you should follow or the type of resources you should even look into, but I'm not going to do that. It's time to wrap this video up, so I'm going to talk about one last thing, which is crafting a good blurb and a log line. If you take a look at some of the most popular and trending books on Wattpad, you will see that they have great blurbs, and some of them even have log lines. Do you need both? No, but it's good to have both if you're trying to attract Wattpad's attention. So a log line is kind of like an elevator pitch, and it's a one-sentence description of your book that's meant to instantly hook the reader. So I'll show you an example from my book, which is the one that got shortlisted last year. And we should all know what a blurb is, but if you don't, it's the thing on the back of a book that tells you what the story is about. Now, there are a million different ways and a million different formats that can help you write the quote-unquote perfect blurb. So I'm just going to be honest here and tell you what I did, and that's basically just look at some of the books I had on my bookshelf, look at some of the genre that I write in, look at some of those books, trending books on Amazon and things like that, to see what formula they used, and I tried to apply that to my story. You want to give your readers something without spoiling everything, so of course introduce your characters, give a little bit about what the reader can expect and what's the challenge that they're going to face. So taking another look at my blurb, when you're reading it, you immediately know it's a billionaire romance or a CEO romance. The main character has a problem, and in order for him to solve his problem, he needs help from the love interest, which hints at additional tropes like fake dating and forced proximity. And the final sentence is kind of in the feeling of a cliffhanger, so it makes you wonder, what choice will Clark have to make and how will it affect Elias? Because it's a romance, we all know that it's going to end on a happily ever after, but it's the journey of the characters getting to that happily ever after is what makes readers intrigued and will make them want to see exactly what happens next. So you can take my advice that I've been giving in this video, or you can Google and do whatever you want to do. Just don't overwhelm yourself and think that things have to be perfect the first time around, because they really don't. But the more you write and the more you read, the more you learn, and the more you practice, the more you get better at this craft. So please don't give up and don't feel discouraged if you haven't seen any quote-unquote success on Wattpad. That can be taken in many different ways. Maybe 10 followers is someone's success compared to your goal of wanting 1,000 followers. So it really doesn't matter. It's all numbers at the end of the day. What matters is putting out quality content that you enjoy, and something that makes you feel good. And like I said before, it took me a literal decade to get one of my books shortlisted, and I didn't even win at the end of the day. But I'm honestly not going to complain. I'm still so very happy about what I was able to accomplish in my career on Wattpad, all the opportunities I was blessed enough to have. So please know that things may not happen overnight, but if you keep up, they will happen eventually. So please stay positive, you guys. And before I forget, or before anyone tries to come at me, yes, my book that got shortlisted is a Wattpad original. However, that does not mean my book got any type of special attention during the Wattys. So if you haven't been paying any attention to anything that I've said in this video, or even the last few sentences that I said prior to this, then let me say it one last time. I have been on Wattpad since 2012. And when they started to introduce the first quote-unquote paid program, I don't even remember remember what it was called back then. It's been so long ago. But when they started to introduce paid programs for their writers, I managed to get into that around 2014. And I've been lucky to have been in other opportunities along the way, but not once in all that time have I ever had one of my books get shortlisted or win anything in the Wattys. And yes, I've been entering stories for the Wattys since the Wattys have been a thing. So yeah. And I'm also not saying that special treatment doesn't exist on the platform. Maybe it does. I have no clue. I just write stories and I mind my business. And if I happen to catch Wattpad's attention, great. And they want one of my books to be in their program, great. If not, oh well, it's not the end of the world. But I am not, and I have never been one of those to receive any type of special treatment. My book got shortlisted because the writing is good. Probably the best that I've written in a while, and that's literally just it. I definitely know what I need to improve on and how I can get better, so my book isn't perfect by any means. But I refuse to allow it to become the target of unwanted hate. So when you guys see writers that are in all these Wattpad programs and you think that, you know, they're just getting handouts left and right, I'm telling you now, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. And if you guys want to join the Wattpad Creators Program, or if you want to pitch them a story and get it into the Wattpad Originals Program, I'm going to link all of that information in the description box below for you. So to wrap this video up, everything that I talked about is in the description box below. So go ahead and check that out if you want to. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and thumbs up this video and share it with your friends if you found it helpful. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.